as our musicians keep playing. Dear Lord, that song talks about not being a slave to fear. And dear Lord, tonight I want to kind of speak on that. Pray that you'll just be with me. You know I'm nervous. But I hope that what you've told me to say, someone here tonight needs to hear. Help me not to be a slave to the fear right now. And dear Lord, help us to live our lives in such a way that we're not slaves to the fear that the devil tries to give in our way, to put in our lives. Because we're children of God and we know you've already won the war. We know how the story ends. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, preacher. I thought I was a little scared when you gave it away. Well, I was afraid no one would show up tonight, but apparently it was okay. I told Edward earlier, if no one shows, we know who to blame. Of course, you know, if anything goes in the wrong church, we always blame the preacher anyways, right? So we would have been right on task with that. Preacher came to me a little while ago and kind of asked me to preach on the revival, and he kind of told me what was happening. I'm like, okay. Now, you got to understand, I'm more of a singer and a musician and not a preacher. Don't think I necessarily do that bad of a job at it, not looking for accolades or anything like there, but my first choice is to be over here. I used to think when I was a youngin' and then I hit 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, and first few years in college, I kind of looked at that and I thought about going into preaching, and I remember I got up one Sunday and I was probably 19, 18 years old, and I tried it for the first time. You talk about being a slave to fear. I was scared that day, buddy. But I learned something. We all have our gifts, and my gifts are kind of more there, and I learned very quickly that I could affect more people in a greater way with music than I could with words. So I am not a preacher. And I point that out because I want to tell you that when I am preaching, I take that musician's mentality. See, because when you get over here and you hear a song, y'all don't expect me to write a new song every Sunday, right? In fact, some of y'all I get on y'all's nerves because I introduce new songs way more often. Miss Cora said I picked the hardest ones to sing. I don't know. But what do you do as a musician? And Joy, you'll attest to this. If you hear a great song, what's the first thing you want to do? Go get it and practice it and learn it because you want to share it. Well, I've never understood why that's perfectly okay in the music world, but it doesn't seem to be okay in the sermon world. You've got to spend hours and hours each week, and I guess maybe if you're called to do that, that's a good thing, and I'm not saying it's not. But where I come from in mine, I come from that mindset is a good sermon that I heard that I want to share with you. And I first heard it at a time in my life when I was a slave to fear. And it's probably one of the most profound sermons that I've ever listened to that had an impact on me at a time when you really need to hear it. Y'all ever had that? You just needed the word. And whether you got it on the radio, whether it was a song, whether it was a sermon in church, these days we can be a little bit more technologically advanced. Mine was on a podcast. Some of you old folks, podcast. What P's cast thing nowadays? I don't know. But I heard it on a podcast, and it was Stephen Furtick, but in doing some more research, it wasn't original to him. This idea was around before that. So I chose a sermon that meant a lot to me. And with that thought, it meant a lot to me at a time when I was really down. Preacher gave the example, I think it was the other Wednesday night. I don't remember exactly when it was, maybe 2 Wednesday nights ago, might have been 3, talk about the devil having a tool cell. And the devil he was going out of business. Now we know the devil's not going out of business. Going out of business tool cell. And he had all his shiny tools laid out. He had anger, he had bitterness, and he had resentment, and he had hatred, and he had bigotry. And all nice and shiny. And over on the edge was this one little faded, worn out old wedge. And a guy came along and said, and he looked at the prices, and these are kind of expensive. How much for that old thing? And the devil said, that one's not for sale. That's my main tool. And the guy said, what is it? Why won't you sell it? He's like, that's the tool that allows all these other ones to work so well. That's the wedge of discouragement. And with that, if I can just wedge my way into someone's heart, whether it be Christian or non-Christian, if I can wedge my way into their heart a little bit, it makes all these other weapons so much more effective. And I think the devil works through discouragement. And I know we're supposed to be a revival and we're supposed to be upbeat, and Lewis talked about it and how we're going to get all excited, but here's the problem. It's hard to get excited if you're living with discouragement in your life. I used to go to a lot of gospel singings, and we'd sit there and, you'd hear this song and it would send chills through you, and invariably someone would get up there afterwards and say, if that don't light your fire, your wood, it must be wet. How many of y'all heard that before? Okay. Well, I got news for you. If we want to light a fire revival, some of us that's hard because our wood's pretty wet. Our wood's pretty wet with the things that are going on in our lives, the situations that we're facing. And so it's hard to light a revival fire, a new, fresh excitement, a fresh wind, if you will, when we're too worried about everything that's going on in daily life. The devil has got us discouraged. And so the sermon tonight, we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel. We're going to start in verse 3 if you want to turn there in your Bible. 1 Samuel chapter 1, starting in verse 3. And you'll know this story. The story usually gets preached somewhere around Mother's Day. Mother's Day, if you're a preacher, you got two choices. You could do the Proverbs 31 woman, or you could talk about Hannah. That's pretty much it on the Mother's Day sermons. That really is not to say there's no other good examples, but they all seem to come from there. And so we know the story, and the story goes, Hannah didn't have a child. She desperately wanted the child. Every year she'd go, she'd pray. She would pray so hard that Eli, the chief priest, thought she was drunk, accused her of being drunk in church. And eventually we know that God gave her what she wanted, and in return she gave the child to the Lord. And that's the part that we focus on. But I want to look at some other characters and perhaps that story from a little bit different angle tonight. And so let's start reading in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 3. And it says, year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Now, when it says this man, we're talking about Hannah's husband, who was Elkanah. Elkanah had two wives. Hannah was one of them. And the other one, she wasn't so nice, Peninnah. Let's keep reading. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. We're looking at three people here. We got Elkanah, we got Hannah, and we got Peninnah. All three are facing a situation in their life. All three are facing discouragement. The devil's getting to them and discouraging them in a certain way. We're going to look first at Peninnah because really and truly she's kind of the left out character, and we're not going to mention her much tonight, but she's facing discouragement same as the other ones are. We don't really know why. We could infer that because Elkanah is giving double portions to Hannah, maybe he loved her more. We really don't know if he loved her more or not. Because if you read in there in verse 3, it says he loved her because he loved her and because of this. So we don't know if she got double portions because she was a favorite, or if she got double portions because he was trying to make her feel better for not having a son. We kind of assume that she was the most loved of the two, but we don't completely know that. But whatever it was, she was facing discouragement. I don't know if she was worried about Hannah taking her place. I don't know if she was worried about Elkanah loving her more. But here's a lady who should have been happy. She had what Hannah wanted. She had kids, not just one, sons and daughters. She has the blessing of children, but rather than using that blessing for good, and rather than cherishing that blessing, rather than saying, Hannah, I'm so sorry that you don't have children, please help me raise mine, let's all be a happy family, she chose to turn her blessing and let it be a breakdown. A breakdown in decency, a breakdown in human kindness, and a breakdown in her relationships. Because you know good and well, if she was doing this to Hannah at the temple, can you imagine what she was like the rest of the time? You're supposed to be on your best behavior in church. And she was acting bad in church. And if Elkanah's seeing that, you know it had to affect those relationships all the way around. So she had this blessing, but yet she wasn't happy with it. You know, as Christians, do we sometimes see that? Do we see all those people around us that have all these things we want, and we want them too, and we get a little mad at them? And sometimes they even rub it in our nose that we don't have it. I mean, some people are nice about it. Some people are not so subtle with their rubbing it in your nose. And maybe the blessing's children, maybe the blessing's possessions, maybe the blessing is positions or job titles or whatever it is. But there are those people that will rub our nose in it. But, you know, sometimes like that. Sometimes life is just like that. Practical point here. Sometimes those who appear to have it all, who appear to have what we want, their life isn't so great. It really isn't. We look at it and we think they have everything. We know they kind of, well, we think they have what we want too oftentimes. But their life isn't great. Everybody's life has its problems. You know, Lisa just got through reading a book, and the first chapter of the book is all, well, I didn't read the rest of it. I only read the first chapter. But the first chapter is all about the idea that so many people are unhappy these days because we compare our circumstances to everybody else's. And we look at them and we get unhappy because we don't have something. When, you know, all those other people, they ain't got it so great. They really don't. I mean, let's face it. What do you put out there on Facebook? The best. You don't put a picture of the cake that flopped. You put a picture of the cake that turned out beautiful, right?
Come on, Brother Joe.
Huh? I'll eat them both. My mother-in-law the other week made a pound cake, and she said, it was so bad I threw it away. I'm like, you what? You threw a pound cake away? How dare you do such a good thing? But we put the best out there, and sometimes if all we're looking is other people's best, we get unhappy when we need to realize that, you know, they got their own issues. But Peninnah, I think, was put in here, and she's not going to be our major focus today, but she's kind of a lesson in how not to act towards others. If we're the ones with the blessings, can we be nice to other people about it? Can we not rub their nose in it? So she's kind of the anti-example, how not to act. We clearly see she's the bad girl in this. She is portrayed that way, and we're going to assume she is. But the other two people, they're the good guys. But they're the good guys facing some problems. They're the good guys facing some discouragement. And they're trying to handle it good. Unlike Peninnah, who's clearly not trying to handle it worth a hoot. These other two are actually trying to handle it in a decent way. So, want to look first at Elkanah. What do we know about him? Well, first of all, we know he's a fairly wealthy and successful man. We know that because he had at least 2 wives. At that time, it was not unthinkable to have more than 1 wife if you could afford to keep them. I have trouble keeping the one that I got and affording her. I don't know. So he must have had some money if he was able to afford 2. He had twice the fun. Hold on now. Yeah, no, okay. We know he was wealthy. All right. Lots of wives around. I know lots of kids are a blessing. I'm not sure if the blessed is the man whose house is full of wives. I'm not sure about that. But we know he had at least 2. We know he was a church-going man. Look at this. This wasn't a one-time thing. Year after year, he went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord. That was verse 3. Now, that's the trip that he made year after year, and I'm assuming that was the big trip. We're not really privy to his daily worship, but I got news for you. If he was willing to make that struggle to go every year, I'm betting his daily walk was right. I really am. What else do we know? Maybe he was a little clueless. I say that because if this Peninnah provoking Hannah went on year after year after year, why didn't he put a stop to it, you have to wonder? Or maybe instead of clueless, maybe he was really smart, because I don't know about you guys, but getting in the middle of a fight between 2 women. So he was either really clueless or really smart. I'm not sure which he was there. But we do know more than anything that he loved Hannah, and he was trying to do the right thing. He really, really wanted her to know that I love you. I don't care about the children. It's not your fault. But it just wasn't getting anywhere. He gave her the double portions. He was concerned for her. And you see, therein lies the trouble. He was trying to talk to her and everything, but Elkanah, he was a man. And guys, let's face it, we are by nature fixers. Are we not? And what's the first thing, if you go to a marriage conference or read a self-help book, what do they tell you about women? Do they want to be fixed? No, they don't want fixing. What do they want? Diamonds. Diamonds will fix a lot of things with some of them, now I will tell you. But they don't want to be fixed. They want you to listen to them. They want you to sympathize with them. The other year, one of the presenters at school came in for some professional development, showed this video, which kind of illustrates that. And the guys will find it funny, and I think the ladies will too. Maybe we'll find it funny. That's hilarious so far. It's not working? Oh, darn. No, that's not it. Go down. I had this all put in nicely, so it should have worked. Actually, Lisa, cut out of there and go over to, if you'll go over to the desktop, it's on there. Give her a second. If not, all right, she's saying don't worry about it. We'll mute this computer so we quit hearing the buzz. I'll give you the hint. We'll look it up on YouTube. This title of it, It's Not About the Nail. And it shows this woman, and at first you only see part of her face, and she's like, it's the pain. I just feel like there's something. It's weighing me down. It hurts all the time. I can't stand this. It won't go away. And then she finally turns, and there in the head is a big old nail. And then the husband's like, well, you know, honey, if you just take that nail out, and you know what she does, right? She gets mad at him for trying to fix it. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you. Sometimes I just need you to listen. I really wish they had it. Any luck? Nope. Okay. But that's kind of the way it is. And at the end, he's like, okay. And so she tells him, and she kind of relates all this bad stuff that's happening, and he looks at her, and he says, that must be really hard. And she says, aw, that's so sweet. And he leans in to kiss her, and about that time, you know what happens. The nail in her head hits him, and he goes, oh, if you would just, and she gets all mad at him again. But that's about how we do. Men, we are fixers. You know, some of us are better at fixing some things than we are the other. You give me something electronic like back there. If I was back there, I'd have you a video playing, but I can't do it and fix it from up here. I'm pretty good at that stuff. You give me music that's in the wrong key, I can fix that. You give me a kid that won't learn, I can try to fix them. Sometimes, not always, but I can try. I can't make them do their homework, as some of our, Anglin's not here, is he? Okay, I can't fix Anglin doing his homework, but I can fix a lot of things. Our preacher, I don't think there's a machine that he can't fix. Is there? I didn't think there would be. He's very humble about that. There ain't much he can't fix when it comes to machines. I bet there's some church members you can't fix, though. Broke is broke is broke is broke is broke. Anyways, we are fixers. Some of us are better at it than others. Some of us fix things in different ways, but we are fixers. Any of y'all ever watched Tool Time? Tim the Tool Man Taylor? He wanted to fix everything. Now, what happened when Tim tried to fix something? He usually broke it way worse, but we're kind of like that. Give us a problem, we'll solve it. That's us. And so what we have here in this passage is a man that's a fixer by nature, and he's frustrated because he can't fix the issue that's most important to the person that he loves the most. Hannah desperately wants a baby. She's sad, but he can't fix that problem. If you've ever been unable to get through to a child, if you've ever been unable to lift the mood of a wife or a husband, is it frustrating? See, Elkanah is frustrated because he's faced with the situation he can't fix, but he's not the only one. Hannah in this story is frustrated because she's dealing with an expectation that's unfulfilled. She wanted a child. She doesn't have one. Not only is it unfulfilled, but she's facing the backlash of other people because she doesn't have one. They're both frustrated. And when I first heard this sermon, the title of it was Frustrations of a Fixer. And it hit me because I'm a fixer. I like to solve problems. Even if I can't solve the problem, the mere act of me trying to fix it makes me feel better. It really does. It makes me feel like I got a plan, like I'm doing something. So I want to speak to you first off, all the Elkanahs, the fixers. And maybe what we have to say here tonight sets you free from something that's been holding you back from doing what God's called you to do. A new way to look at your responsibility to the people you love and some of the situations God's called you to impact. But we're also going to talk to all the Hannahs who are frustrated by a disappointed expectation in your life that no matter how much people try to help you through your issue seems bigger than the encouragement they try to fill it with. So we're going to try to speak to both of them in the same sermon, and if you pay attention, I bet you can kind of relate to both of them. See, at different times, and sometimes at the same time in different ways, we can relate to being the fixer that's frustrated because something's beyond our control, but we can also relate to that being unhappy because some expectation is not met. So let's have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us be in your house tonight. Thank you for the story that we can get here as we move further into the Scripture, dear Lord. Speak to each of us, whether we're fixers and we're frustrated, whether we have broken hearts because of unmet expectations, whatever the discouragement, dear Lord, whatever that's causing the fear in our lives, help us to overcome that. Amen. All right, if you relate to Elkanah, and I'm not saying this is all the men, but it's mostly the men, maybe some of the women, perhaps some of all of us a little bit, but let's face it, us men are a little bit more inclined that way. It's a terrible thing when no matter how much you pour into someone, you can't make them happy. Men, have you ever been driving home from work and you know what's waiting on you at home? Maybe you better not answer that if your wife's right here, but you know what I'm talking about. You know you're going home, maybe you've already called or whatever, and your wife at home is unhappy. Now, it might have been unhappy because you forgot to do something. Maybe it's unhappy because she was not feeling well. Whatever it is, she's unhappy, and you're sitting there and you're just been to work. You had a hard day. You're doing the best you can. You're really, really, really trying. But the best you can do, she's not happy with. Has that ever frustrated you? Like I said, this internal dialogue. I might not would say that out loud right now. But for a guy, can I tell you, there's nothing more frustrating? Because we're built to win. We want to win, and we want to win the most in that relationship that matters the most. And I don't know about you guys. Maybe I'm the only one. But when my wife's in a bad mood, I take it personally. What does it feel like? If she's unhappy, must be my fault. What did I do wrong? And it's not just wife. It's frustrating with the wife, but maybe it's a husband, maybe it's a kid, maybe it's a best friend. Maybe it's someone you wish would love you, but they don't love you. Maybe teenagers, it's someone that you want to date or that you did date and they broke up with you, whatever. It's frustrating when you're giving all you have to give, but you're not accomplishing anything. And we see Elkanah's frustration in 1 Samuel chapter 8. He talks to Hannah. He says, "Why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" You see, there's something broken in her, but he interprets it as some sort of indictment against him. And the fact of the matter is we know there's nothing wrong with Elkanah's ability to reproduce. It's not his fault she doesn't have a baby. It's not about him. But he tries to make it about him. You know, sometimes we all just need to learn it's not always about you. That's a hard one for me. Because I get frustrated and I get exasperated. Sometimes you'll hear a husband say to a wife, "Why aren't you happy? I built you this house. I'm doing the best I can. I work overtime. I'm doing all I can, but you can't get enough." And we take this and we feel frustrated because we took someone else's brokenness, someone else's unmet expectations, and we've attributed them to a failure on our part. And you know, once that starts, it's this cycle thing of condemnation. Because once you start going down that path, it's a hard path to get off of. And like I said, when I first heard this sermon, I was on that path. Lisa will tell you, if she's in a bad mood, I tend to get in a bad mood because I think I did something wrong. And I have to really, and I'm preaching to myself as much as I'm preaching to you guys, because yeah, I heard this once. Man, I just wish I could learn it really good and never have to hear it again. I really do. But you know, women aren't immune to this. How many of you heard a mom or a woman say something like, nobody loves me, nobody appreciates all that I do, nobody is thankful that I made the bed and I washed the dishes and I cooked the food, nobody appreciates all that I do. Well, you know, you made it all about you. Maybe it's not that no one appreciates you, ladies. Maybe it's that you have teenagers. They don't appreciate much of anything. Don't give me that. You know what you take for granted. Someone's daughter, preacher, is back there going, what? Ladies, maybe it's your husband is just clueless. Told you, we're going to talk about the men too, so it's okay. Maybe it's not about you. When you're feeling underappreciated, when you're feeling not loved, maybe it's not about what you're not doing or what you are doing. And maybe it's just about the other people. They're broken. They're hurting. And if you realize that, it makes it a little bit easier to have compassion on them. It's not always about you. See, men wrap up their security and their identity in their job performance. We have a tendency to look to other people and say, are we doing a good job? Whether it be at work or whether it be at the house. Elkanah is successful in a lot of areas. We talked about he had some money. We know he had 2 wives. But in the one area where it counts the most, he feels he's coming up short. And you can hear it in the desperation. Why can't I make you happy? Don't I mean more to you than 10? And today, the modern equivalent, why can't you be happy? I took you out to the Olive Garden. I built you a house. It's got everything. Shoot, we'll even go to the Longhorn next week and you can get you some Wild West shrimp and the best steak on the menu. But you know, it's really not about you. You get the feeling Hannah wanted to say, it's not you. I've got something else. I've got something going on. And no amount of your double portions of meat, no amount of blooming onions from the Outback or Wild West shrimp is going to fix it. I don't want that. I want a baby. See, it wasn't about the person disappointing Hannah. It's about the frustration in her life. And the sooner we realize that, a lot of times that frees us up to actually be able to help with their problem. For every frustrated fixer, for every exasperated Elkanah, God's got something to tell you tonight. He wants his job back because you're not very good at it. It's not your job to fix someone. Let me say that. God wants his job back because you're not very good at it. We weren't designed to be good at it. And you know, some of you are saying, I sure hope my husband or wife is listening to this, but you know, you might be the one that needs to hear it a little bit more than the others. I don't know. But trying to hold others up isn't our job. Our job is to walk with them through this life, to try to support them best we can, but it's not our job to fix them. It's not our job to fill them. Only God can do that. So for every man who's frustrated, trying to make your wife happy, but you're not getting anywhere, for every woman that's trying to make her husband feel successful, but you can't make him feel like a champion because he's walking around like a loser, for every child, teenager that's trying to make a parent happy and you're doing the best you can but they don't recognize it, for every parent that's trying to get your child back on a path and they won't seem to follow. You know, there's a time where you got to take responsibility and say, what am I doing wrong? But you also got to realize in some places, in some problems, the problems are too deep for you to touch no matter what you do or how much you care. That's God's job. Any of y'all ever watched Jerry Maguire? Only one person? Tom Cruise, Renee Zellweger? Okay, some of you have. Miss Cora's seen it. I'm impressed. Anyways, there's a line in there that kind of talks about the world's mentality and what gets us in trouble a whole lot. In the line, if you watch the movie, you know, Tom Cruise meets and he kind of marries Renee Zellweger and they get together and then they separate because he really didn't think he loved her and they went their own way and he had this huge moment in his life and he realized it meant nothing without her, so he's got to go win his woman back. And he gets there and she's in there with a bunch of divorcees and they're all bad-mouthing men, and Tom Cruise walks in and they're all kind of giving the stink eye, and he goes up there and he starts on this long speech. And I don't remember all the speech, but it's sometimes in there he sits there and he looks at her and he says, "You complete me." And he looks so sincere with those eyes. He really does. But can I tell you, that's the biggest hunk of baloney, the biggest hunk of theological destructive concept that ever was put out there. But that's what we think. See, we teach our young girls that if you marry the right guy, you'll be happy. We teach our guys, if you get the right job or you make a certain accomplishment, you'll be happy. It's no one else's job to complete you. You weren't made to be completed by another person. You were made to be completed by God. And you know, the sad part about that, you get two half people together and you think they're going to complete each other? If anything, that's just going to lead to more resentment because I'm expecting you to do something for me that you were never capable of doing. And that just makes matters worse. Sometimes you got to relieve and release yourself from God's responsibilities. Because if you're trying to do that, you're way above your pay grade. Yeah, you need to be on the job site, you need to be working, but you realize you're not the foreman. You're not the boss. You're just the worker bee. And that's okay. You need to do what God intended you to do and quit shouldering the burden, but walk with people. Let's talk a little bit in our closing time here. We'll talk a little bit about Hannah because she's not immune to any of this. And while I think we all can see the frustrated fixer part, the brokenhearted Hannah is I think we can all identify with as well. See, the thing is about Hannah, though, she's always held up to be this virtue. She really wanted something, and she prayed, and she prayed, and she prayed, and God gave it to her. And that part's really good. I'm not saying anything bad, but the part in there, you got to realize this wasn't a one-time occurrence, year after year after year. How many years of her life did Hannah waste waiting on something that God chose not to give her yet? How many years did she spend pining away for something that, for whatever reason, God hadn't fulfilled that? And so we look at her as being super virtuous, and we give Mother's Day sermons on her. But the fact of the matter is, apparently she wasted years of her life after something she had no control over. That's kind of a thought when you think about it. How many of us are doing that? We're wasting our lives, whether it be days or minutes or hours or years, wanting stuff that God's given to someone else, but He hasn't given to us yet. And you know, maybe He'll give it to us eventually. Maybe He won't. And maybe the something you're wanting is a possession, a car. There's some cars my kids would love to have. Every teenage boy I know just about has a list of their top cars they would love to have. When they get money, they're going to buy this one. You know, the preacher, he's probably got a list of tools that he'd like to buy. He's already got the tools. If not, you could go borrow it from Cora, because if you don't have it, she's got it somewhere out there in the barn. Maybe it's not possessions. Maybe it's abilities. Can I tell you, as much as I'm pretty good at a lot of things, I often can joke, I'm, jack of all trades, master of none. I wish I could fix something, like a car. Because every time I have trouble, I have to go, preacher, what does it mean when I get this error code? I wish I could do that. I wish I could play guitar like Rusty. See, because I can hit a few chords and I can strum a little bit, but I can't play a guitar like Rusty. Maybe it's ability. Maybe it's a position. Maybe you really want to be the boss at your job. Maybe you really wanted to be, I don't know, leader of the JRTC group. Maybe you wanted to be youth group president. Maybe you just wanted to be the head cheerleader or something. I don't know what your goals are. But for most people, there's something that they want that they don't have. And sadly, as we get older, tell me how many of you ever done this? Have you ever realized you should be more thankful than you are? Especially around Thanksgiving. We say we're thankful for all this. Any of y'all ever get a little depressed at Thanksgiving? Because you got all this stuff, but rather than focus on the 99 blessings, what do you focus on? The one thing that you really want that you don't have. And I'm fond of telling people, I've got everything I need and I got most of what I want. The Lord has blessed my life. But there's times when, can I tell you, I really want an RV. Because unlike the preacher, I'd love to go up the Blue Ridge Parkway, but my wife doesn't like sleeping in tents that much. So I'd love to have an RV. It's one of my dreams. I'd love to have a boat. I know that dry well in the water, which you throw vast heaps of money or whatever he says it is. There are toys that I would love to have. And maybe one day I'd love to take a vacation to Hawaii. I thought I'd get an amen from my wife back there. I figured you could even hear that from the sound booth because she brings that up routinely. There's things that I want that I don't have, and rather than focusing on all that good stuff that I do have, sometimes I let that get me down. And then the ironic part, the weird part is I realize I should be happier, so now I'm unhappy that I'm unhappy, which kind of makes it even worse. I don't know about you. But I think Hannah was kind of following in that trap. Sometimes we look for things to fill our lives. Sometimes we look for possessions in our life. Sometimes we look for people to fill our life. But folks, especially on the people end, when your heart is broken, it doesn't matter how much love or encouragement you get from someone. What happens with a broken vessel? You can pour all you want in the top, but it all leaks out the bottom. And sometimes when we're looking for affirmation, for encouragement from others, that validation from others, we can't even receive it. And we can't hold on to it when we get it. I don't know. But we get a little bit and we like it. And we think it'll help us. You know, it's kind of like drinking salt water. Guy stranded out on a boat in the middle of the ocean. He has no water. What's the temptation? There's all this water around you to drink it, but what happens if you drink salt water? Makes you thirstier. See, the way around that isn't to take a little bit and hope that it tides you over. If you're craving addiction, if you're addicted to that feeling you get when someone loves you, that satisfaction when someone offers you encouraging words, you got to watch out how you feed that addiction, because you don't cure addictions by feeding them just a little bit to tide you over.
That's right.
You know, if you're an alcoholic, you don't take just a little drink to tide you over. If you're into pornography as your addiction, you don't watch just a little bit of a dirty movie to tide you over. If you're addicted to the love that you think you want from a boyfriend, you don't let him play around with you just a little bit in hopes that you'll tide him over till he'll make a better commitment. See, if you're going to break an addiction, you don't do it by getting just enough of it to tide you over. You break the addiction by finding a different source of pleasure, of affirmation that is capable of fulfilling the need you're trying to meet in the first place.
Right.
And Sam, bring me that hammer and that bottle, because I forgot to bring it up here. See, there's this cool little illustration that I saw. And here's the idea. You got a hammer and a bottle. These are excellent things to have. What can I do with the hammer?
Smash that bottle.
That wasn't the goal, but I could do that. I can drive a nail. I can take out nails. I could knock something into place. I could knock it out of place. I could break the bottle if that was my goal. What's the bottle good for? Holding stuff. Man, if I want to drink, this is good, right? Nothing like a little, you know, it's harder and harder to find these little bottles of Coke. There used to be nothing better than the little glass Coke bottles, and they're getting hard to find. But man, when you're thirsty, nothing better. And you could reuse it if you want, put water in it, it's still good. But what happens if I try to take a drink out of the hammer?
You'll be gone with that.
I ain't going to get much. What if I try to hammer in the nail?
You can do that, but that bottle's gonna break.
Yeah, you know, not only is the nail probably not going to get hammered in very well, but I'm probably going to break the bottle. But we do that with our human relationships. We seek to drive down a stake. We seek to get our identity, our affirmation from other people, when the other people were never meant for that job.
Oh boy.
And so not only can they not accomplish that purpose, but what's happened? They're going to break into a million pieces. Our relationships are going to break into a million pieces. See, people were never designed to complete you. We talked about that. We had a daily devotional this week, and I've been doing one that I've really enjoyed from, and I forget who put it out, but it goes into some meanings of some Hebrew words and some deep thoughts behind them. And this week I read one where it talked about the Hebrew word for heaven or the skies is shamayim, with an I-M at the end. The Hebrew word for earth is eretz. And the cool thing is the shamayim, the Hebrew word for heaven, ends with an I-M, and Hebrew words that end with an I-M, according to this author, mean they're plural. They're infinite. but yet the earth word is singular. It's finite. See, the things of this world are finite. They cannot complete us. They cannot fulfill us, especially if your heart's already broken and you can't even hold what you're trying to give. Only God, who has an unlimited supply of love, an unlimited supply of grace, an unlimited supply of mercy, an unlimited supply of courage to give you when you're facing fear and discouragement, only He's the one that can complete you and fill you. I never quite understand why we're surprised when we turn to humans and they let us down. Why are we surprised at that? But we are. Sometimes you just need to take your brokenness to God. Because you keep trying to use other people, you're just going to break them too. And you know, when you're getting that mode, when you're getting that woe is me mode, and I just need you to tell me this, and I need you to do that, I need you to do that. You ever find yourself, you even sound needy and you don't even like it yourself? But I got good news for you. When Jesus hung on the cross, He fixed your needs for encouragement and affirmation in the deepest places and in the most permanent way. You don't have to be empty anymore.
That's right.
You know, when I begin to love my wife with a love that's unconditional, not just if it makes her happy, not just because I want to fix something, not just because she needs it, but if I just love her unconditional because God called me to, that's a real love. When I love my kids regardless of what they can give me in return, that's a real love. And you know, when you have that real love, it's kind of amazing what you can start to accomplish. You could be the best fixer in the world and never even intend to, because now you're not trying to organize the fixing, you're just the one that's God using. And if you allow Him to use you, you'd be amazed at what can happen. In closing, some of you are the exasperated Elkanahs. Maybe today you need to have a conversation to someone in your life. I don't know. Maybe the conversation goes like this: I love you, but I can't complete you. I want to fix you, but I can't. And I've been putting pressure on myself that God never intended. And because of that, I've been driving you away. I've been pushing you, and all this, what's wrong with you, but it's not about that. I need to learn to trust God. Maybe you need to have that conversation, or even if you don't have that conversation, maybe you just need to have that internal conversation. And when you surrender your part back to God, it's amazing what He can do. See, Elkanah benefited from this. Later on in the story, if you read on there, verse 19, after they went back, Hannah did her prayer with Eli and to the Lord and all that. It says, early the next morning they rose and worshiped before the Lord, and they went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Elkanah got to be a part of a solution. He was happy about being a part of that solution. I'm betting good things happened when he quit trying to fix her and ask what's wrong with her and just loved her. Maybe you're the broken-hearted Hannah and you've been looking for someone else to fulfill you. Maybe you need to have a conversation that goes something like this: I'm sorry. I'm no longer holding you responsible for what's wrong in my life. I've been frustrated, and I've been frustrated in a lot of ways, but I realize that it's not you I'm frustrated with. It's something in me that's broken that I'm frustrated with. And you might be a little scared to say, well, if I quit getting them, they'll quit trying. No. They'll probably, if you get out of God's way, I'm telling you, He'll work it out. But you need to tell that person, I've been putting a weight on you you weren't designed to carry. And I need to learn to go to God. And the truly beautiful thing is, when you come to terms with the fact that this person's not the fixer, whether it be on either side of that, you become an instrument of a healer. You really do. Now, what good came out of this? All sorts of good. See, Hannah finally got her baby. She dedicated him back to the Lord. But the impressive thing isn't that she dedicated the baby back once she got it. It's the fact that when she left there at the day, after praying like a drunk person, well, I shouldn't say praying like a drunk person. After praying and they thought she was drunk, she went back and she trusted God. See, that's the test if you really trust God. She went back. There was no guarantee, but she trusted God. Are you okay even if he doesn't answer what you want? That's a true test. Do you trust God? Are you okay if you don't get what you want? Now, Hannah, it worked that she did. Later on in chapter 2, it's entitled Hannah's Poem. And it starts, and Hannah says a little prayer or a poem, and it goes like this. My heart rejoices in the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warrior are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry and are hungry no more. And here's the cool part. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who had many sons pines away. Did y'all catch that? How many kids did she have? Any significance with that number 7? She who was barren is now complete. Not because Elkanah fixed anything. She trusted God to fix it. The one that didn't trust God, Peninnah, the one that was ugly about it, the ones that taunted, the ones that wasn't happy with what God gave her, notice what's happening to her. Pining away. Well, what do you want this morning? Do you want completeness? Or do you want to be pining away? That's the question you got to ask. Are you a frustrated fixer that needs to let go and let God do it? Are you an exasperated Elkanah or are you a broken-hearted Hannah that needs to realize no one is going to complete you? The only one that can is God himself. And so what we're going to do, we're going to close and we'll ask the preacher to come up here and you can come pray. We're going to sing that same song because here's the thing. When I was here, when I heard this sermon, when it meant so much to me, I was in a place of fear. See, part of being the fixer, the part that bothers me is I'm afraid. If I can't fix it, what's going to happen? If I don't get what I want, what's going to happen? And I'm scared. And that takes over your entire life. You can't have revival fires when your wood's wet. Let it go.